My bills are good. What about you? You got any? Good morning, everybody. The banging of that gavel means we're about to call into session our Commerce Full Committee here for the House of Representatives. Today's, last time I checked, was March 15th. Let's find out if we've got a quorum. Mr. or Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Alexander, Boyd, Calfee, Camper, Faison, Haston, Hazelwood, Holzclaw, Johnson, Lynn, Manis, Moon, Powell, Powers, Sparks, Thompson, Towns, Vital, Zachary, Vice Chairman Bricken, Chairman Vaughn.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
That is outstanding. Before we get started today, do we have any personal orders from our members? I know there's a lot of folks in town this week. I don't know if anybody sees anybody they recognize or if it's all home folks that are here on a regular basis. So seeing none, we're going to move on down the line. But before we see our first bill up, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping for those of you scoring at home. Let's see, we're going to take item 5 is rolled 1 week. So if you showed up to hear that today, you're going to have to come back a week from now. We're rolling that 1 week. let's see, we're gonna do a little bit. We're gonna move item 8, House Bill 2055, to the leadoff spot on our calendar today as a sign of respect for Chairman Reagan. And then also, we're going to roll House Bill 1871 to the heel of the calendar, so that in case that elicits more discussion, we'll be able to get through the other items between there. So that would be item 11 is rolled to the heel. Everybody got that? And that way we'll have plenty of time, and folks, we can dispense of our business otherwise. So with that, that's what our lineup today is going to look like. First on our list now is Chairman Reagan with House Bill 2055. Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. As you all are well aware, bills have to pass out of both chambers exactly the same. I was given some unsettling news just a few hours ago before I came in here. The Senate is wanting to send my bill to summer study. Therefore, rather than take your time, I am actually going to ask for a motion from this committee to also send it to summer study in the House out of respect for my Senate sponsor. And with that explanation, sir, I'm at the committee's discretion.
All righty, without objection, we're going to send that to summer study.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you, Chairman Reagan. We appreciate you being a good steward of our time this morning. For those of you who did not get to hear the presentation on House Bill 796, buckle in. You're about to learn something about precious metals from our resident scientist, Deputy Speaker Curtis Johnson. So, Speaker Johnson, you are recognized on House Bill 796. We are motion and second. You're in proper posture, sir. Please enlighten us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, if you were not on the subcommittee, Tennessee and Alaska are the only two places in the United States that mine zinc. And together, they produce more zinc than anywhere in the world. We have 5 zinc mines across the state in East Tennessee and Middle Tennessee. And there are 2 critical byproducts in the zinc mining process. One is germanium and the other one is gallium. Now these, I guess you're wondering what they're used for. They're used for, making transistors, electronic devices, fiber optics, microwave circuits, lasers, semiconductors, just a wide variety. At the present time, there are no processing facilities in the United States for these 2 byproducts. So what happens is when the zinc is mined in Tennessee, we ship germanium and gallium to China. China processes it and then sells it back to us. So what this urging resolution 796 does is it's a joint resolution proposing the construction of a NiStar germanium and gallium recovery facility in Clarksville, Tennessee. Mr. Chairman, I'm open for any questions.
Mr. Speaker, you filled us in so well, I'm not sure how anyone could have a question with regards to that. So thank you for
Mr.
spreading
Chairman.
that knowledge here today among us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any.
agree.
I don't see any questions on that one. So we've got a question on the bill. All those in favor of sending House Joint Resolution 796 to calendar and rules, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Surely not. House Bill 796 or House Joint Resolution 796 is on its way to calendar and rules. I see Chairman Hazelwood wishing to be recognized, and I will always make sure that is happening.
And I thank you very much. I know I'm out of order, Mr. Chairman, but I had to step out for a phone call and didn't have an opportunity during personal orders. I wanted to recognize Mrs. Gail Green and her daughter Emily. They are my constituents from Signal Mountain, and just welcome them to the Tennessee House.
We're
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. We are so glad you folks made it here today to see a fantastic representative do her job here. She does a great job representing you. Next up, it is that time of year. Speaker Johnson, House Bill 1876. Sir, you're properly recognized. It's in front of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1876 was requested by the Air Conditioning and Heating and Refrigeration Institute. Technologies has a large manufacturing facility in Montgomery County, Clarksville, and they employ like over 1,500 of my constituents. And Mr. Chairman, Carrier, I believe, is in your district, and they employ over 1,800
Yes, sir.
employees. This industry statewide employs over 40,000 Tennesseans. What this bill does, it allows manufacturers of HVAC products to use refrigerants approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. This legislation was signed into federal law in December of 2020, and it was called the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act. And it provides the authority to phase down the use of hydrofluorocarbons. I think that's correct, isn't it, Mr. Chairman?
Hydrofluorocarbons, yes,
That's
sir.
right. And phase down the use of those, and it requires the use of approved substitute chemicals. These refrigerants undergo mandatory transitions from time to time, and this will allow transition into the next generation of refrigerants, which has a better environmental profile. So this will ensure that manufacturers can comply with federal regulations and transition into refrigerants on time. I'm open for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Speaker. Any questions for Speaker Johnson? I want to give a shout out. Went to see the Carrier plant operations in my home district a few weeks back. There are 4,500 air conditioning units coming off that line a day. So it's quite an impressive operation and is a huge employer in my district. And I appreciate you bringing this legislation that helps an industry that's involved so many Tennesseans. In seeing no other questions for Speaker Johnson, I hear the question on the bill. All those in favor of House Bill 1876, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. 1876 is on the calendar and rules. Chairman Wendell is presenting another bill, so we're going to roll him to the heel of the calendar as well. Next up is House Bill 1698 by Chairman Jernigan. Do I hear a motion? Motion and second on 1698. Sir, you are in proper posture in front of us. Please tell us about this explosive topic.
I may want, Speaker Johnson does a great job describing stuff. Maybe he could do mine as well. Chairman, I believe I have an amendment. I need to.
Yes, sir. I believe we're tracking along with 015023. Does that match up with yours?
15023.
Yes, sir.
That is it.
All righty. Let's go ahead and I'll tell you what. You want to discuss the amendment, or do you
Yeah,
want to?
I can tell what, because the amendment doesn't make the bill, so I can
Okay.
tell
Yeah.
you what-
Let's talk about the amendment.
It's very brief. Last in the subcommittee, you had asked the road builders and the pipeline folks to work something out. They did, and it simply requires notification of at least 3 days before blasting near a pipeline.
All righty. I appreciate the interested parties getting together and resolving this issue. I think that I can tell you that Chairman Jernigan's been very diligent and patient all at the same time. So I appreciate that. Let's get a vote on the amendment. Amendment number 1 to this bill. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. The amendment's on the bill. Now then, tell us about your bill.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. House Bill 1698 will modernize and update blasting standards by eliminating outdated blast vibration compliance options, restructuring and clarifying blast notification requirements, and providing administrative support for market and industry changes. This bill specifically will lower vibrations. It will increase communications with the public and clean up and remove standards that have been on the books since 1975. Last year, had a lot of residential blasting in my area, which put it on my radar screen. And I got with the road builders, and we worked for several months to come up with this bill. And then the pipeline folks are on board now, and it's just much needed changes. And I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone would have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I believe that from talking with the interested parties, this was one of those cases where everyone agreed with you that a update to the standards was due. And we appreciate you bringing that in front of us. And again, your patience in dealing with this, getting it in the, getting all of our parties settled to it. So I don't see any hands up. With that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of House Bill 1698 to send it on to GovOps, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. You're off to GovOps.
Chairman, members, thank you.
All righty. As we said, House Bill 2434 was requested to be rolled 1 week. So next up is House Bill 2627 by Chairman Crawford. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Crawford, you are good to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2627 allows the Board of Examiners the flexibility to license competent engineers and landscape architects who are unable to take the licensing test as it is. It will specifically allow a path to licenses for those with master's degrees or an engineering technology degree, and those who take the principal PE exam prior to completing the required experiences. And I think they have to have 8 years of experience in that field as well. This language was developed by the licensing board after several years of study. They believe that this legislation opens a pathway to licensure for competent engineers and landscape architects while maintaining the protection, health, and safety of the welfare of the public. I stand for questions.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Any? Chairman Hazelwood, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, just a statement. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you bringing this bill. I like it so much. I signed on as a co-sponsor because I think it's just another way to make sure that we have opportunities for people who maybe, when they were going through their educational process, they didn't have the time or the resources to complete an engineering degree, but with the experience that they've had, this will allow them, if they pass the test, if they have the experience, to serve in that capacity. And it's a field where we are in desperate need, just like a lot of workforce areas. So thank you for working with the industry and bringing this bill, something that all of those, like our chairman of this elect body, is a member of that profession. And I think those folks are comfortable with this. And I just appreciate the fact that we are providing opportunities and pathways for people to further their professional development using the experience that they've gained. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
We've got a question on the bill. We're going to honor that question on the bill. All those in favor of passing House Bill 2627, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Of course not. We're going to send 2627
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you,
on to
committee.
finance. Everybody's favorite guy in the building these days, it's Chairman Hicks. House Bill 2267. By the way, let me say this. Welcome, Chairman Hicks. We hope that your time here you feel is productive and that you receive a courteous treatment.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman, it is a little cool in here. I'll say
We'll see.
that.
we'll see if we can't get that taken care of for Chairman Hicks post haste. All right, we have a motion in several seconds on House Bill 2267. You are properly in front of us, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, House Bill 2267 amends the Online Marketplace Facilitator Act. This legislation clarifies that an auctioneer is not considered a facilitator for purposes of the Online Marketplace Facilitator Act. In a nutshell, auctioneers have been specifically exempt from collecting sales tax since the 70s. And so the 2020 Act enacted a new tax on the auction industry and costing a buyer more money and affecting the value of a seller's property.
All righty, I want to be the first to tell you that thank you for not only being a good steward of the auctioneer's money, but the steward of the treasury of the entire state of Tennessee. And I don't know if there's a better guy to be in that role. And I just want to thank you before anybody else gets that opportunity. And I'll be talking to you about an appropriations amendment later. Any questions for Chairman Hicks? I have one from Representative Towns. Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what an auctioneer is. Is there a way that we get a little example of what they do or something of that nature so I get an understanding of what I'm about to vote on? I withdraw.
Thank you. Thank goodness I hear a question on the bill. All those in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Any opposed? Surely not. We're going to let 2267 get out the calendar rules with our best wishes, Chairman Hicks.
Thank
Not
you,
only for
Mr.
your bill, but
Chairman.
also for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
House Bill 8, again, has been, we sent it to summer study. So now we're on item number 9. Representative Cochran with House Bill 2632. We have a motion and was that a second? Okay, here we go. 2632.
Thank you.
Representative Cochran, you will have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and committee. And do we need to take further action on that amendment that was put on?
Given the fact that it rewrites the bill, that's probably a pretty good idea. Let's
Great.
look at, is it Amendment 014422?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Let's go ahead and get that, since that makes the bill, let's go ahead and get that amendment attached if no one has any objections. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? No. It's attached. All right, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what House Bill 2632 does, essentially there's a group of wireless providers who provide cellular phones to folks who are of low income. 41 states regulate this themselves. And so basically this puts Tennessee in that, it takes authority back from the FCC and gives it to the state. Obviously the state is just quicker and more efficient in issuing these licenses. And so again, we're joining the vast majority of states, bringing this to a local level, taken away from the feds, and we have the ability to do that. That goes to the Public Utilities Commission. They're in favor of this as well. And I'll yield to any questions.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Any questions for the sponsor? I see no hands up. Therefore, we are going to call the question on the bill. All those in favor of House Bill 2632, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. The ayes have it. You're off the calendar and rules, Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
All right, Representative Halsey, we are going to talk about House Bill 2069. We got a motion and a second on it, sir. This is a fascinating subject.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. For those of you who were not in the subcommittee, gold has a 5,000-year history as a money par excellence. It's the world's only long-term surviving form of money. It represents the only financial asset is not somebody else's liability to repay you, and it's the only metal not consumed. And as a result of that, all the central banks hold up to 40% in reserve because of it. According to the international banking regulations, gold is treated as a tier 1 asset or collateral under Basel III, which some of you in finance would know a whole lot more about that than me, but it means it's a zero risk asset. I don't think anybody would argue that money and physical risk have never been more pronounced in our nation's history than right now. And looking ahead, at least what scares me, looming in the future, the next phase of the deep state, I think their plan will be to roll out a central central bank digital currency, and then follow that with a universal basic income. Seems to be what their plans are. And so that brought about this 7 years ago. I ran a resolution in the House and the Senate that passed 100% that we would establish a gold depository. And so for 7 years, I've been working at that. And finally, we're to the place where we have investors who want to build it, staff it, and maintain it so that there is no cost to Tennessee taxpayers at all. They will build it. It will be under the purview of the treasurer of Tennessee. In exchange for that, they only wanted two things. They wanted to be able to use the words Tennessee State Gold Depository, and they wanted to be audited by the comptroller's office at least once a year, and they'll pay for the audit. So Tennessee will not have a dime in it, but it's open to everybody anywhere to deposit gold bullion or rare precious metal bullion in this depository. But they also will allow the state of Tennessee to put its gold in there at no charge. And when they get up and running, they have agreed to give the state of Tennessee a revenue stream off of it. But it allows us many, many options that other states won't have in real troubling times when it comes to currency and cash and money. So we don't have a dime in it, but we get to control it. And that's pretty much what it's about. And I'm just happy to be here.
And we too are happy that you're here. It's always better to be seen than viewed. I've figured that out in my time. We've got an amendment that we need to place on this bill. Makes a bill. It's Amendment 015445. We have a motion and a second. Let's get that attached, and then we'll take up the bill. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, no. The amendment is attached. Now back to the bill. Do we have any questions on the bill? Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sponsor. Well, let's put us back on the gold standard in Tennessee.
This bill
Chairman
doesn't
Hulse.
address that. It does give you leverage, and it gives you an option down the road. Doesn't deal with cash.
I didn't think it did. It's billed as golden. I'm going to be voting for it.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Halsey, thank you for bringing this bill. I think it's interesting that we're taking this up today when about an hour ago, Saudi Arabia announced that it's going to enter into negotiations with China to accept the yuan for their oil purchases. And most people will know that our primary driver for our currency is the fact that we're the reserve currency of the world. And the petrodollar since the 70s has been purchased to buy oil. And as we see a transition in the world related to us being the reserve currency, I can't think of a better day or better time to be having this discussion about a depository and voting in favor of establishing that here in Tennessee. So thank you for bringing the bill. I think it's a very fitting day that we're talking about this. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, and thank you, in China, the digital yuan now going to a central bank digital currency, they can completely keep up and dictate the behavior of everybody in that country, in that communist country. They granularly can know exactly what you do, what you purchase, and when you purchase it, and they have assigned, actually, with your digital currency, a social score that if you don't behave or do what you're told or say what you're supposed to say, your score can keep you from shopping at certain places. It can keep you from travel. And this would put us way ahead when those times come here.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Chairman Halsey, thank you for that commentary as well. I kind of keep up with that kind of stuff, and it's so dangerous. I hope this country never see the light of day of some ignorance and some madness as you just discussed. That is very, very dangerous that's happening in Canada, but and not Canada, but in China, but it tends to spread across the globe because people don't think. You know, there's no reason for a government to be able to control and micromanage and see everything that you as a citizen do. That is horrible, very horrible. what I have for you is a question as it relates to this particular bill, good bill, is whether or not when people get a little antsy and they need to go and inspect, can inspection be called to make sure that the goal is there at any given time by the state of Tennessee?
And Chairman Halsey.
Thank you for the question. And yes, the bill itself spells out that the treasurer has access and it will be audited once a year to make sure everything is in order. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Towns.
but what if you need, because of the climate in the country, the climate in Tennessee, things change. Could be a little hysteria here and there based upon what's happening in social media and people start believing certain things. Can the state check it more than once if they need to?
Representative Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, Chairman. Indeed, the bill spells out that the treasurer has complete access 24 hours a day. He can walk in there anytime he wants to.
Very well. Thank you, sir.
All righty, we've got a question on the bill. All those in favor of House Bill 2069, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? No, I hear none of that. So House Bill 2069 is on its way to GovOps. And Chairman Halsey, if you don't mind, we're going to expedite the rest of this calendar and be right back to you shortly, sir.
Okay, I'm supposed to be in ag. Is that all right to run there and send the sergeant to get me, or do you want me to wait?
You know what, Chairman Halsey, I'm going to reconsider my action of roll calling this. We're going to handle you right now. We've got a good head of momentum on. We will let you fulfill your duties. So let's go on and let's take up House Bill 1871. Motion second.
This has an amendment also, Mr. Chairman.
It's just, well, we don't need a motion. It's traveling with, the bill is
Okay.
amended in its
All right.
form that's with us.
All this bill says is that natural immunity is just as effective, as good, or better than the COVID-19 shot. And I have reams of studies to show that. We had professional testimony to verify that in the two health committees. And it says that in this state, businesses and everybody else will recognize that natural immunity is as good. And then that's the whole point of the bill, is for that kind of recognition.
All righty, thank you, sir. And it's my I know I heard this bill in full health, and it's been vetted there several times. I appreciate you bringing this. My wife and I struggled trying to figure out what was going on, but the comparison between natural immunity and the shot, and as time has gone on, we've had more and more studies, and I think we're in a different place these days than we were when we were scrambling around trying to deal with the crisis. So I want to thank you for bringing this. Do we have any questions on this bill? We have the inquisitive Representative Towns today. Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Always that way, sir. Natural immunity, Mr. Chairman, would that be equivalent to what God gives us once we've gone through a process?
That's exactly correct.
So who's going to beat the Lord?
And that's exactly correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Chairman Thompson, or Representative Thompson.
Thank you for the promotion, and Mr. Chairman. So, the CDC has said that vaccinations are at least twice as much more effective than natural immunity, and other studies have said the same thing. So you're saying that all those studies are invalid? They're not really true?
Chairman Halsey.
I'm saying two things. There are very, very many credible studies that show just the opposite, that it is robust, that it lasts a long time, that the memory from T cells lasts a long time. And I'm agreeing with the gentleman right beside you that I don't think anybody in a lab can design an immune system that is superior to the one the creator of this universe designed.
Representative Thompson, you're recognized.
Excuse me. I'm not going to go against all the studies that have said just the opposite of what you're saying. So I'm just going to have to vote no. And personally, I've had COVID and I've had vaccinations, so I don't know which one's better for me personally, but the studies have said vaccinations are better.
All right, thank you, sir. Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Halsey, thank you for bringing this bill. And just to put this on the record, on January 19th, this article is in Reuters. The CDC put out a study that COVID infection is up to 6 times more effective than vaccination is, and the immunity from vaccination. Again, look that up yourself. It's on Reuters, January 19th of this year. If we're going to talk about facts and we're going to talk about evidence-based data, let's talk about the studies. Let's talk about the data. Again, please look this up. This is a study from the CDC that says natural immunity can be up to 6 times more effective than vaccination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that this amendment says that this natural immunity must be verified by a licensed physician, a letter, a documentation, a laboratory test. It's not just me saying I have natural immunity. There's a verification process.
That is correct. And it can be validated by either 2 ways, a doctor's letter or that you've gone and had the antibody test, yes.
Thank you.
Chairman Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question about what Chairman Zachary just mentioned. Were you saying that after you've had the COVID-19, you build up these antibodies and that is what is 6 times more? Is that what you were saying?
I believe, Leader Camper, I believe, yes, that is the case, and that we've seen studies from that. There have been several of them, and that's why, in my estimation, the one thing that we need to do more than anything, particularly as we ride this, and I'm going to editorialize a little bit. Don't get your medical advice from Twitter or Facebook. Go see your doctor. Work with your clinician to establish the best plan for you as an individual so you can know all the risks and all the rewards from the treatment pattern that you've gotten. And so we can, these days, there's information out there, overload, and some that is placed for less than beneficial purposes. And so from my perspective, I just want everybody to have that type of relationship so you can have as much information from the person that's helping you decide your personal health care plan. And so with that, I will climb down off my soapbox and recognize Leader Camper one more time.
Thank you. I appreciate, the commentary, actually. I just want to make sure I heard what I thought he said. So good. I was glad to know that's what you said. So my next question, Mr. Chairman, is the licensed physician that Chair Lady just spoke of, Mr. Sponsor. Are you talking about a medical doctor? What type of physician, or does it matter? Or
Chairman Halsey.
The amendment is specific to a medical doctor, I believe, yes.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 years ago, I didn't have to campaign any because my wife and I were at death's door with COVID-19, and we survived. And I think one of the reasons we survived is so we can raise Sawyer, the 2-year-old we have. But once we were cleared, we donated plasma and we had the antibodies. And they told us that we helped 8 people recover from COVID-19 through our antibodies. A guy came in my office last spring, I guess. Didn't know him, hadn't seen him before or since. And he said, I understand you and your wife were real sick with COVID. I said, we sure were. He said, and you donated antibodies, the plasma, and they had the antibodies. I said, yes, sir. He said, I was saying my last prayers because I knew I was going to die in a few minutes. And the doctor came in and said, we've got something we're going to give you we think will help you. He said 3 days I was home. So I believe in antibodies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Bud.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And I think one thing that regardless of the position you take on these issues is we are all very grateful that appears we're coming through the tunnel. We see the light in the tunnel and we're getting out of this. So I noticed I was following the positive cases in Shelby County over the last 3 days. On the 13th, we had 20. On the 14th, we had 11. And today we've had 14 positive cases. That looks like the beginning of an endemic as opposed to a pandemic. And I know that we are all very grateful where we are. So seeing no more conversation to be had on this matter, we've got a question. All those in favor of sending Chairman Holsey's Bill 1871 to Calhoun Rules, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All righty. Please register those noes with the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Chairman Holsey. House Bill 2242 by Representative Ogles. We've got a motion and a second. You're in proper posture, sir. We've also got an amendment that we need to deal with, and since it rewrites the bill, let's take care of that little bit of housekeeping before we hear about it. Motion on the amendment, and then we've got drafting code 014399. Does that correspond with yours?
That's correct, Chairman. Thank
All
you.
righty, thank you. All those in favor of attaching it to the bill, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. It's on the bill. Now let's talk about House Bill 2242.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. This piece of legislation came out of the tragedy that happened in Nashville, I guess not last Christmas, but the year before that, when we saw a major explosion in downtown Nashville. And with today's new innovations in building standards, we've got high pressure concrete. We're able to create huge spans, cantilevers with post tension slabs that we weren't previously able to do years and years ago. And as beautiful as these buildings are, we need to find a balance between what is aesthetically pleasing and what may be a potential safety hazard to a large population of the general public. And what this bill would allow, not allow, that would force the fire marshal to do is to adopt minimal standards, safety standards, to promulgate rules in accordance with the Department of Safety to include minimum standards for multi-level commercial and residential structures relative to mitigating structural collapse that may result from explosive devices, specifically methods to deter entry into the structure from a motor vehicle. And members, not to get too into detailed, but you'll notice when you see some buildings downtown Nashville, there's conditions that go directly from street level where you see large spans of glass, and there's absolutely nothing to deter even a drunken driver from entering that space, veering from a lane of high-speed traffic and entering the interior of a large building that may have very high occupancy rates. So members, that's what we're trying to get at with this legislation. Just some minimal standards that make sense, just to be sure we don't have vehicles and other things that could pose a large hazard to the general safety of our citizens. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All righty. Do we have any questions for the sponsor? Representative Powell.
Thank you. Obviously, the event you spoke of was targeted here in Nashville, and very tragic event. But just a question: is there any other states or communities that are looking at this, or do you think this is an issue that is applicable in other areas? Or if you could speak to that, I'm just curious if this is kind of an ongoing industry-wide problem.
Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Chairman. There's definitely, depending on kind of what the building is specifically intended for instance, our federal buildings and many state buildings, because they're assessed as kind of a high-risk target, there's definitely different standards that are met in the construction of that. However, in the state of Tennessee right now, we don't have a minimum standard, for just high-density, multi-level residential and commercial buildings. So the standards we would put on, for instance, a building that members of the General Assembly are in, or a federal courthouse, or a state court, any other courthouse, we're not, and don't misconstrue that as saying that those same standards should apply, but there needs to be a minimal standard just that kind of mimics common sense to be sure that we're not creating a situation that could potentially be extremely hazardous.
Thank you, sir. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The event that you described, in a vehicle with explosives in it is extraordinarily rare. I mean, very, 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 very rare, especially, when you look at our state, even once, it's happened. And that was a couple of years ago now, I guess. What kind of expense are you talking about, and what would this look like? And you mentioned glass. Are you suggesting that maybe buildings not have a wall of glass as a front to their building, or what are you suggesting?
Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you for that question. That's a good question. More along the lines of, like, right now, if you've been down on Broadway in the last several weeks, you'll see lines of newly installed, we call those bollards. They're shiny. They look real pretty. A lot of those are sitting sideways right now. That's what happens when you try to retrofit a sidewalk or a building with something that's meant to protect the general public. Retrofits are extremely hard. They're extremely costly, and sometimes they're more aesthetic than anything. When bollards and these building techniques are done, just the same way we do, for instance, guardrails on our state interstates. When done properly, those go down 3 to 4 times what you see visual into the ground. So it's actually effective at doing what we intend it to do. When we take a piece of metal and put 4 screws in it to the sidewalk, it's really not going to do what's intended. So this would just allow on the front at the beginning in the construction phase, just to ensure that anything that needs to be done to keep vehicles from the lane of traffic directly from entering a building, it's done correctly. There's reinforced concrete, steel, rebar. That's done in the construction pre-phase before that concrete is installed, rather than a after the fact retrofit.
But are you suggesting that every single building built from the signing of this bill or implementation of this bill going forward, that is a large building that maybe has a lot of apartments in it or office space, multi-story, that every single building be fortified with ballards outside? Because, like I said, the event that we're talking about is extraordinarily rare. And even if someone parked next to the ballards and exploded a van full of explosives, those ballards wouldn't do anything to that building, to protect that building. They really wouldn't at all. But even so, someone doing that is extraordinarily rare. And someone driving into a building intentionally is, again, extraordinarily rare. So are you suggesting that every building going forward would be fortified with ballards?
Mr. Sponsor.
I wouldn't say every building, but I would suggest that high occupancy buildings, especially like, for instance, our food courts, I think that should be specific. And that's why we've allowed the fire marshal to promulgate rules in conjunction with the Department of Safety and Homeland Security. For instance, the high capacity food courts, areas in which there would be lots of individuals sitting or gathered, not so much even for explosives, just entry from a vehicle directly into a building. That just, to me, seems like common sense, that we shouldn't even have to be considering whether or not that would be a possibility. Years ago, just recently, buildings were not even constructed with the ability to do that. But because of the new technology and our new facilities to produce large glass storefront, we're seeing more and more of that into the design, which there's no exterior elements that have any structural value whatsoever. You can literally cantilever the facade of a building, put some curtain walls of glass up, and just and it's beautiful. And I don't take this as a trying to stop a design method, but there's several things we could do. Simply coming in at a 3 or 4 foot level, putting a horizontal piece of structural steel that's tied to the concrete pillars. I mean, there's lots of things that we could do to make these buildings much safer that aesthetically would still look the same. Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Representative Lynn, I can speak to this a little bit. Is this bill does not prescribe what mitigating methods are employed in this. It's more bringing this attention to ask the state fire marshal and the building codes folks to promulgate rules if necessary. We're not intervening ourselves in the code making process. What we're doing is the way that I read this bill is that it's saying, hey, we want you folks to consider this. And if it turns out that there's different methods and means that can accomplish the same thing, that's for those building and life safety people to figure out and go through their code process. So what we're doing here, we're not imploring people to use certain methods. It's for those professionals in that field to take a look at this as a consideration moving forward. So, because honestly, to begin with, I'm in the real estate business, and I'm saying, hey, we're dictating means and methods to developers and investors and other people. I think we ought to leave that to the codes people, and this bill allows that to happen. We're not prescribing the cure for a perceived problem. Representative Lynn.
Well, I was also thinking about the insurance industry and how, they determine risk. And, if they determine that it was such a large risk, they would be asking for the standard as well. But thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Representative Powell.
I mean, no offense by this comment, but I appreciate maybe what some insurance and risk and loss of expense and capital, what that includes, but making sure that we secure the safety of individuals. There's no amount of money, in my opinion, that can replace loved ones that I might lose or that you might lose. And I think by simply looking at these design standards to make sure that the public appreciates when they walk into a building, there's a certain level of expectation they have for safety. And moving forward, I think the sponsors brought up some really good points here. Just looking at this to make sure that we are protecting people. Unfortunately, we continue to live in a world where people are looking at tactics, and have ill intentions. And again, I reference this happened downtown Christmas not too long ago here in Nashville, Tennessee. And fortunately, no one was killed in that incident that happened. But I think back to Oklahoma City. I think back to the World Trade Center was bombed before it was bombed on 9/11. And fortunately, survived that attack, but then was attacked by a plane. So I think looking at this and seeing if it makes sense. I mean, who knows? We might be the leader in the country at changing design standards for buildings, especially when you're talking about state buildings. Makes a lot of sense. So again, I just think, studying this, whatever the cost it might be, protecting lives and giving certain expectations when people walk into a building, they expect to be safe, especially when you've got high-rise, high-density buildings, is a worthwhile cause in my opinion. Thank you.
We got a question on the bill. We will call the question. House Bill 2242. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please record your no with the clerk. 2242 is on its way to GovOps.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee.
House Bill 2518 by Representative Sexton. Motion. We are moved, then we're seconded. So, Mr. Sponsor, please share about House Bill 2518.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. What this bill does is in the rural area, we still have a lot of people that are getting their water from wells and springs, and Some of them are living in an area that utility water is close to them, but they're not in their district. Back in the 1930s, they created these different water districts to help manage people to get some utility water. And what has happened is some of them have progressed and others have not. So in some communities, you may live close to utility water, but it's in another district. All this bill does is it just creates a process by which that these two entities, if they agree to, they can enter into an agreement that they can supply water to a different district than what they were originally, their original district was. So that's all that this does. It creates a process. It's permissive. And if it does anything else, I'm not aware of it.
Thank you, Representative Sexton. And for those of us who were in attendance at our learning sessions earlier this year, you can see that this bill is probably one that we need to have in place. My little bit of editorial commentary. So I don't see any more questions. All those in favor of House Bill 2518, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. 2518 is off the calendar and rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those comments. Thank you, committee.
House Bill 2346 by our very own Chairman Boyd.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. We've also got some amendments. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have amendment, this drafting code 015273.
That is what I'm showing as well. Since that rewrites the bill, let's get that thing attached. All those in favor of attaching amendment on our scorecard, it's amendment number 2, but the drafting code is 15273. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. We are on the amended bill, Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, you don't have to turn the TV long at all now to hear reference or threats of cyber attacks, whether it be a belligerent foreign state, whether it be terrorism, or whether it be someone holding a utility ransom through ransomware. And so what this bill does is it says that utilities in Tennessee, and that would be natural gas utilities, that would be water, wastewater, and electrical utilities, are required to develop and maintain a cybersecurity plan. And we don't want to see that plan. We believe that it would be dangerous for people to have eyes on that. So we know that's proprietary and top secret, but we do want them to certify that they have a plan. And if they don't, we'd like to help them make one. And private utilities will give that certification to TPUC, with the exception of electrical co-ops who will join in with the public utilities and will do that during their annual audit to the comptroller. That list of utilities will be forwarded to the General Assembly. It will also be forwarded to Homeland Security. Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions on that.
All righty. Thank you for that explanation. Anybody have any cybersecurity questions? I hope not. All righty. I see none. We're going to call the question on Chairman Boyd's bill for House Bill 2346. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. 2346 is off to GovOps. And Representative Powell, I must apologize to you because I was looking on my March calendar and 2643 is down there by itself with all the explanation behind it. And I just flat skipped over it.
That's all right, Mr. Chairman. You must be a fortune teller too, because I was actually going to roll that 1 week if I could. So.
I like when all's well that ends well. 2643 is rolled 1 week, and now we have come to the moment that we get to hear House Bill 2733 by Chairman Wendell. We've got a motion and a second. Just on general principles. I understand. All right, House Bill 2733. Chairman Wendell.
Mr. Chairman, members, please direct your attention to drafting code 014653. If legal could make sure that's the right drafting code. And please refer to subsection 3 to the
Let's
words.
get that amendment attached and then we'll just talk about everything, Chairman Wendell.
That's
Well,
fair.
Not motion on the amendment. Okay, on the amendment, I've got a second. All in favor of attaching the amendment since it rewrites the bill, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, no. We are now attached. We are now back to the bill. Chairman Wendell.
Mr. Chairman, members, I accepted this amendment at the request of the governor's office, and this simply allows the discretion to be provided to the employer, but it does provide for an employee's day off on Veterans Day if they are a veteran, and they provide the adequate notice. But the governor's office asking for a simple amendment to allow the employer to have discretion, and I agreed to that. And I think it makes the bill better, and I'd appreciate your consideration.
All righty, thank you for bringing this today. I think I heard the question being called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you, sir. You are off to GovOps.
And Mr. Chairman, I want to give a special thanks for the input of Joe Towns on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And folks, we are nigh in the life of our committee. Hopefully next week will be the last time that we gather. I want to congratulate y'all. We disposed of 15 bills today in just under an hour. But if y'all will buckle in next week, hopefully we can conclude our business for the year. Representative Towns, I cannot wait to hear what you're being recognized about.
Mr. Chairman, you're a good man. You got good eyes, and you did right to recognize me. There were some distinguished men that came in this room, and I want to acknowledge them before we got out of here. I saw some men from the distinguished fraternity of Alpha Phi Alpha. If you don't mind, I want y'all to stand up. I want to make these guys feel welcome because we're doing a 9/11 day, my fraternity and their fraternity day. Thank you all so much. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, sir. And with no other business before us, we stand adjourned.